The squeal and rattle of German tank tracks crunching through British towns and villages seemed to many in 1940 to have been a likely outcome of the war, following the Dunkirk evacuation and then the French capitulation. Hitler's Operation Sea Lion invasion plan indeed called for the landing of Panzer divisions on England's south coast preparatory to an advance on London. But as we all know, Sea Lion was indefinitely postponed by Hitler following his defeat in the Battle of Britain and eventually quietly cancelled altogether. Britons would not hear the rumble of Panzers churning across their bowling greens and village squares. The war ended in 1945 with Germany's total defeat. The last German prisoners of war held in Britain were sent home in November 1948 to help rebuild a new country, West Germany. But 13 years later, German Panzers did thunder through Britain, much to the surprise and in many cases the overt hostility of British people. In 1961, an entire German Panzer battalion landed on UK soil, led by senior officers who had served Hitler and in many cases had once fought the British Army in places like Normandy. This is the largely unknown story of the 1961 German invasion of Britain, when the Panzers finally made it to dear old Blighty. By 1960, the UK had a huge army based in West Germany called the British Army of the Rhine, garrisoning the British occupation zone and also the British zone in West Berlin behind the Iron Curtain. The enemy was the Soviet Union, and any conventional conflict would have involved enormous tank battles on the North German plain. British tank units needed live-fire training facilities, but such facilities were limited in Germany, and they had to share them with a new German army, the Bundeswehr, now Britain's ally. In 1945, the German armed forces had been almost completely disbanded, but in the new Cold War it became obvious that democratic West Germany needed armed forces to help defend itself from Soviet aggression. A new military was created in 1955 called the Bundeswehr. The men carefully selected to ensure that the old wartime ideas had been extinguished once and for all. Naturally, such a new formation, created so soon after World War II, needed a corps of experienced officers, and the West Germans were forced to re-employ hundreds of officers from Hitler's army, all carefully vetted, from generals to colonels and majors, while the rank and file and the junior officers had been teenagers in World War II, and largely untainted by association with the former regime. The German Panzer Force was re-established, though it was not to use German tanks. Instead of Panthers and King Tigers, the new Panzer Force was given American equipment, specifically by 1961 operating the M48 Patton tank. In order to create more space for British armoured regiments to conduct live-firing exercises in West Germany, it was decided to transfer Bundesheer Panzer live-fire training to Britain, leading to the extraordinary sight of tanks emblazoned with the Iron Cross driving through Carmarthenshire in Wales in 1961 and being met by protests in the village of Castlemartin. You have to remember that it was only 16 years after the end of World War II. All the middle-aged residents had first-hand experience of war with Germany. And in most settlements across the UK, war memorials existed to honour British dead fighting Hitler and the Axis. People generally had a dim view of Germans, and especially the older generation who didn't entirely trust them, not after 2 world wars fought against them still within living memory. So protests were expected and understandable. But equal numbers of Welsh people welcomed the Bundesheer, happy for the economic boost to the local economy German soldiers would bring. After all, this was the army of the new democratic West Germany, the Federal Republic, Britain's ally. Commanding the 84th Panzer Battalion in 1961 was the well-fed Oberstleutnant or Lieutenant Colonel Karl von Kleist, scion of a very famous German military family. Born in 1914, his father was one of Kaiser Wilhelm II's adjutants. Karl von Kleist joined the army in 1933, one of the first officers of Hitler's new Panzer force. He took part in the attack on Poland in 1939 and France in 1940, and then the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, fighting on the Eastern Front, latterly as a regimental adjutant. Wounded 3 times in action by 1943, von Kleist became a Panzer Division staff officer. He was captured during heavy fighting against British forces in November 1944, remaining a prisoner of war until 1947, ironically held for 2 of those years in Newport, Wales. With the creation of the Bundeswehr in 1955, von Kleist was commissioned a lieutenant colonel and in 1960 given command of the 84th Panzer Battalion. It is noticeable that during his initial trip to Wales in 1961, von Kleist chose not to wear any of his medal ribbons on his uniform, unlike many of the accompanying officers who were also World War II veterans. In 1957, denazified versions of World War II medals and badges were created and permitted for wear by Bundeswehr personnel on their uniforms, including the Knight's Cross and the Iron Cross First Class. It has to be said that the early Bundeswehr still looked very similar to the World War II Wehrmacht in uniform style, a point probably not lost on local British people in 1961. The field cap, a staple of late-war German soldiers, was widely worn by West German Panzer troops, as well as the side cap, both of World War II design. The grey coloration of walking-out uniforms was very similar to World War II styles, including the type of collar patches, and the leather coats and camouflage uniforms all had a distinctly World War II look, even if of a new form and design. The 500-man Panzer Battalion with 40 tanks took up residence at Merian Camp, Castle Martin, headquarters of the Royal Armoured Corps Range and All-Arms Training Area. And what would they be shooting at? Interestingly, old World War II tanks, that is, British World War II tanks, such as Churchill's, the very same tanks that Colonel von Kleist had fought in Western Europe in 1944. In fact, Castle Martin became a home away from home for the Bundesheer, as until 1996 German Panzer units rotated through the base on tank training courses, with hundreds of German troops constantly in residence in this quiet corner of Wales, along with a permanent staff of around 170 German soldiers keeping the base running. When the German army left for good in 1996, they left behind quite a few vehicles. Today, one old Leopard 1 tank is still at the base as a memorial to this very friendly Panzer invasion of Britain. Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.